Happy Friday, everyone. My name is Ajit Gopalakrishnan. I'm the Chief Performance Officer at the Department of Education. I'm pleased to be joined by two of my colleagues, Renee Savoy and Danielle Bousquet. You'll hear from them momentarily. This is the third of our session, of our series, third session in the series we have called Behind the Numbers, From Data to Dashboards. And the impetus for these sessions really came from districts and school leaders and data folks who said, we know you're doing a lot with the EdSite and putting out a lot of reports and dashboards and data, and a lot of different data sources feed into these calculations, whether they be for accountability indicators or otherwise. We know you have a lot of documentation out there as well, but are there things that we can do before these numbers get turned into metrics and show up on dashboards, and you're like, whoa, how did that happen? And so the idea behind this series is to sort of give you some pointers in terms of not only where the data come from, but also steps you might be able to take to make sure that the dashboards and the metrics that we ultimately end up reporting are as reflective as can possibly be about what is actually happening in your schools and districts. We did 2 sessions prior to this one. Our first session was on accountability indicators that come from TCS, the Teacher Core Student. We talked about indicators 5, 7, and 12 of our next generation system. Our second session was around the Find Contacts report and chronic absenteeism. And our third session today is based on the post-secondary readiness report. The post-secondary readiness report is on EdSite. It is basically indicator 6 of our accountability system that looks to see whether our students are showing objective measures of readiness for the post-secondary world. And historically, this measure has used data from SAT, ACT, AP, and IB exams. And this past year, we expanded it to look at dual credit as well. But the purpose today is to really go behind that and really get into the weeds a little bit of it so that you understand exactly how those sources are really coming together to feed that dashboard. So with that, Renee, I think I'm turning it over to you to get us started. And the way, in terms of format, we have about an hour, and you can use the chat to submit your questions as you go along, and maybe we'll try to weave them in. But when we're done with the presentation, we'll absolutely pause where you'll be able to raise your hand and orally ask a question as well. So with that, Renee, I'm going to turn it over to you.
I will go ahead and get started then. The agenda for today, I'm going to do a quick review of indicator 6. Based on the people in the room, I think you're all pretty much experts on what that is, but we can all use a review. And then Danielle is going to talk a lot about the data files and the specifics of those and the kind of laborious process that happens behind the scenes to go from those data files to the resulting public reports that you'll see. And I'm going to go through all of the different places in public reporting where you're going to see those indicator 6 values pop up. So for the quick review of indicator 6, these slides probably look really familiar to you if you're familiar with the accountability system. If you've looked through using accountability results to guide improvement, we go pretty in depth into the specifics of all of the indicators, including 6. You're also probably noticing that some of our language around indicator 6 and actually indicator 5, a connected indicator, is changing. We're sort of upgrading the language a little. So for indicator 6, you're going to, and I'll point out sort of some of the inconsistencies that you'll see in the language we use, but what we should be referring to, when referring to indicator 6, we should be saying post-secondary readiness. And so this is the percentage of students in grades 11 and 12 achieving benchmark on at least one of the following. So it's SAT or ACT or AP or IB. So lots of different ways to meet that benchmark expectation, or new in 21-22, was earning 3 or more college credits through dual credit coursework. And so that could be dual enrollment coursework, which is generally taken on a college campus, or concurrent enrollment coursework, which is happening usually taught by high school faculty on the high school campus. That's sort of the new part, that last dual credit part got added in 21-22. So what you see on the bottom half of the slide with the benchmark scores listed for each of those assessments, that is what's been in place since 2014-15 when we first launched Next Generation Accountability. The addition in 21-22 is detailed on this slide. So it's 11th and 12th graders who cumulatively, during their high school career, earn 3 or more college credits. Danielle's going to talk more about some of the specifics of this, about through your high school career. Doesn't matter what high school you were in. Maybe it does. Spoiler alert. But Danielle will go through that with us. These courses, the student needs to have earned a C or better. And we're only considering credit-bearing dual enrollment and concurrent enrollment courses. We are not considering remedial courses, audited courses, or pass-fail courses. And as you know, in the accountability system, while we expanded Indicator 6, we left the target for this indicator the same. So the target is having 75% of 11th and 12th graders meeting these standards that I just reviewed. And the way that we figure out who those 11th and 12th graders are is through PSIS. You're going to hear PSIS mentioned a lot in this presentation. And specifically for this indicator, we're looking at June PSIS. Who are your students in June? So going a little deeper into benchmarks, I am going to go ahead and hand it over to Danielle.
Thanks, Renee. Okay, so as Renee mentioned, we have lots of different ways for a student to meet the benchmark. They don't have to meet it in each criteria, just one of them. So they don't need an AP exam and an IB exam and SAT, right? It's just one of those pieces. And they can meet that at any time in grade 9 through 12. So you've got a really brilliant 9th grade student, gets a 4 on the AP US History test, even if they never meet indicator 6 after that. So they, take an SAT, they don't meet benchmark. It doesn't matter. Once they've met it once, then that will count both towards the 11th and 12th grade years. Keep in mind that will not count toward their 9th grade years, even though they passed the AP test in 9th grade. They don't count in indicator 6 because indicator 6 only looks at 11th and 12th graders. They can also meet that benchmark anywhere, so long as that anywhere is a public school district in the state of Connecticut. So you've got a kid who's enrolled in one district, they meet benchmark on the SAT school day. In that district, they'll count for their 11th grade year. Then in their 12th grade year, they move to a different district. That meeting benchmark from 11th grade will still count in the new district in their 12th grade year. So you don't need to suddenly rush to test all of your new students. Those scores will still come through. However, if they met the benchmark through at a private school or at an out-of-state school, we do not receive those records. So those students will not get factored in. Their benchmarks will not get factored in. Okay, so the way that we get these files is like we said, directly from we call the test vendor, which for SAT and AP is the College Board, and then ACT and IB are separate organizations. These files come to us without the matching information that we would use for instance, SAT school day. So SAT school day, we're talking about the one that, almost everybody takes the test in 11th grade on the same, 1 or 2 days in April. Those records, because they're part of the state assessment, the statewide, mandatory assessments, those records those records come in with SACIDs built. So it's very easy. We can just match the SACID from the SAT school day to the SACID from PSIS. The regular SAT, so SATs that were taken, kid shows up on a Saturday, at a school to take the SAT or any AP exam, ACT, or IB, none of those records come to us with SACIDs. So that means that in order to assign these kids back to your district, we need to match the students based on their name and their date of birth. Any difference between the student's PSIS name and date of birth and what we get from the test vendor makes it harder to match the student. We do the best we can. We have very high match rates, but it isn't perfect. So the closer you can get to those things being the same, the better. And often they get matched by hand in the end. So so just a couple of reasons why that might, where we might have problems or things to look for. On the next slide, thank you. So of course, any misspelled or you enter the birth date incorrectly is going to cause a problem. Nicknames are actually a huge problem. So Abraham and Abe. So notice the first three letters don't match. The first two do, but that third letter, the E, does not match the R from Abraham. So it's difficult to match. Same thing, for example, Brianna and Bree. We see that. Students with hyphenated names, if they come in a different order, so John Smith Doe or John Doe Smith, right? Those do not match automatically. With the hyphenated names, sometimes one of the names will be missing. So John Smith Doe in PSIS, and then John Doe without the Smith on the SAT. We'll see lots of switched names. So the first and middle name especially switched, but occasionally the first and last name get switched. Name changes. So if students' parents get married, they change their name. And then in birthdays, we see a lot of, especially month and day. So April 5th being like 4-5 versus May 4th being 5-4. So we see that come up a lot. Occasionally we see it with the year, not as often, but and then it happens a lot where you use the current year in the birth date. So if the kid's born in 2006, you get the right day and month, but at this point, you've been filling out forms and whatever, and you've used 2023 so often that you just end up using that in the birth date. So that can cause problems as well. Okay, so the SAT specifically, we receive that file in late July, and it includes all SAT administrations up to June 30th of that year. Indicator 1 is the SAT school day only. Indicator 6 is both SAT school day and other SAT administrations. So when we get that file, it's going to include both pieces of indicator 6. As we've talked about, the SAT school day records will include SACID, but the other administrations will not include SACID. So those records are going to have to be matched through, the computers and then by hand for the remaining cases. SAT scores are super scored by subject across administrations and any time they took the exam in grades 9 through 12. For indicator 6, for indicator 1, where it's SAT school day only, we're just taking that one score. So even if a student stayed back, for instance, and took it twice, that we won't be super scoring that. We're only going to consider the score in that year. And for the SAT, they must meet benchmark on both ELA and math. And we're going to talk about super scoring in a minute, but just wanted to give that, and we'll do all the super scored tests at the same time. Talk about that. So the ACT file, we get that in early September, and it includes all ACT administrations up through July 31st. ACT usually does one administration nationwide each month, so we'll have those 12 administrations. Again, we're going to say this over and over. These records do not include SACITs. They must be matched to the PSIS student records. This obviously is somewhat challenging. There's not a whole lot we can do because those are maybe not necessarily being administered through your school, but just something to be aware of. If you know a kid is going to be taking an ACT, remind them they need to be careful. And on ACT, they have to meet benchmark on 3 of the 4 subtests. So you got English, reading, math, and science. They just need 3 of those 4 to be considered having met benchmark. And again, these are super scored across subject. So let's talk about super scoring, because I know that may not mean anything. So for SAT, the benchmark for ELA is 480 and the benchmark for math is 530. So let's say you get a kid in 11th grade on the SAT school day, takes the SAT and gets a 430, which is not meeting benchmark on the ELA, and a 600 on the math, which is meeting the benchmark. So because SAT needs both the ELA and math scores, they would not be considered as having met the benchmark at the end of grade 11. Let's say the same kid goes out, I want to improve my scores, so goes out and takes the SAT again through a regular administration, gets a 500 on the ELA and a 510 on the math. So now in that second round of testing, the 500 for the ELA is meeting benchmark, but the 510 for the math is no longer meeting benchmark. So for that one test, the student wouldn't be considered as having that benchmark. But when we do the super score for grade 12, now we include both of those tests. So the high score for ELA is the 500, and the high score for the math is the 600. And so even though they didn't meet benchmark on any one exam, they're going to meet benchmark across their whole high school career. So in grade 12, they will count positively toward indicator 6. ACT is similar. So except now we have 4 subjects. So for example, they take an ACT in March and they get 17, 18, 24, 20. And only the math is meeting benchmark. If you look at the scores, the benchmarks above. So 1 out of 4, they don't meet benchmark. Then they go ahead and they take another one in May, the same school year. They can take, right, we don't just count 1 for each grade level. They can take 6 in the same school year. They all count. Let's say now they get a 20 on the English. So now they're meeting benchmark on English, but their math score went down. So they're not meeting benchmark, right? So now they've got 1 out of 4, again, on that particular ACT administration, not meeting benchmark. If we super scored both of those, right? So now the high score for English is 20, meets benchmark. The high score for reading is 19, which doesn't. The high score for math is 24, which does meet benchmark. And the science score is 22, which doesn't meet benchmark. So now they've only got 2 out of 4. So for 11th grade, they still would not be considered as having met benchmark. But let's say in 12th grade, I think it's next. Yep, the kid goes out and takes another one. So now they get 22 on English. They had already met benchmark on the previous one, but now they've improved. Their reading goes up to 23. Math at 20, science at 21. So now English and reading have met benchmark, which is only 2 out of 4. But when we go to super score at the end of grade 12, now we're going to have the 22 as the high for English, the 23 is the high for reading, the 24 is the high for math. And now they've gotten 3 out of 4 meeting benchmark. So it goes across any time that they take it in high school. Okay. Now, AP and IB exams are not super scored because you only need to meet benchmark on any one subject, any one administration. So there's no need to super score those. We get the file for advanced placement in late July, and it includes the administrations of all subject from that school year. Most AP exams are taken in May, so it'll have all of those. Any student scoring 3 or higher on any single exam will meet benchmark. For IB, we've got 7 Connecticut districts now that offer IB programs in high school, which is awesome. We get that file from IB in mid-July. It includes all of the administrations for that year. And if a student scores 4 or higher on any single one of those exams, they will meet the benchmark. And in case we haven't said it enough, neither the AP nor the IB files include SACIDs. So these are going to get matched to PSIS records. Now with AP and IB exams, because those are administered sort of in-house by most districts, that's something where, you know, making sure that when you're giving directions, making sure that students are conscious of they need to have those records matching, I think could be really helpful in making sure we get the most records back. Okay, on to dual credit. So dual credit is again received directly from our institutions of higher education, our partners in post-secondary, and they will give us a data file based on some specifications we've created, and it contains records only for those students who registered with the college. So if the student is enrolled in the high school class for a concurrent enrollment course, but did not register with the college to get the college credit, they will not appear in that file. So they have to have registered with the college. All courses need to be 100 level or higher, and below 100 level is usually remedial courses. And they must have earned a C or better in the course. As Renee said, not pass-fail courses are not going to count in this. So they have to have a C or better. And they must have 3 or more credits accumulated across all of their years. So again, just like with the exams, they can take a course in 9th grade and it'll count when it comes around to 11th grade. They can take a course in a different district. So long as it's not a private school or an out-of-state school, that will still count toward indicator 6. And very importantly, the college or university needs to send us the data. So if a school that you're not partnered with, or if a school that you are partnered with is not sending us the data, then you may want to give them a nudge. So here are the IHE partners, our post-secondary institutions that we receive data from and we've been working with. So and including the dates of the data that they've sent. So for example, we have dual enrollment data from the community colleges, the Connecticut State Universities and University of Connecticut, all the way back from 2015-16. So if a student took a course in 2015-16, that is going to get included. And then I'm not going to read the whole slide. You guys can take a look at that. But we've got, I think we've got a really good sampling of partners, and we're trying to get as many records as we can so that we can give you guys credit for the good work you're doing. So just, if you're trying to make sure you're improving your dual credit records, you want to get everything in there. Again, you got to make sure they're registered with the college or university. And just like with the benchmark exams, these records do not necessarily contain SACID. So the other ones definitely don't contain SACID. But the files that we get from the post-secondary institutions don't have to contain SACID. In fact, they don't even have to contain the high school at which the student is attending. So it can, we do a lot of detective work with those. If you want to make sure you're improving the matching, first, if you can convince the university, if you can provide SACIDs to them, if they have the capacity to accept that, providing the SACID is one way to pretty much guarantee that the match is going to come through. And then just like SAT, ACT, if we'll have a better chance of getting that match perfectly if the registration that they do through the college or university matches that registration from PSIS. I know I've repeated myself a lot, but that's an important thing to do.
That's great, Danielle. I think that was an excellent presentation. Another good nugget for our recording archives. I know, Renee, you have some slides on the actual reports upcoming. I just wanted to pause here to see Danielle has really gone behind the numbers to show you how the sausage is made, if you will. Do you have any questions on the different sources of data and the things that you could do to help improve the matching? As she mentioned, the match rates are already very good, actually. And that's kudos to Danielle and the EdSite team for really slaving through that. And that's something that, they've built some processes that will make subsequent years faster, but the best way to ensure accuracy is to try to, make sure to have those names and date of birth and SACID where possible, have them be accurate and match PSIS. That's the key. Are there any questions for Danielle at this point? Stick them in the chat. So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat so far. All right, Renee, I think we can move on to the rest of it. Please go ahead.
Okay, great. So this report here that you see on the screen is the traditional next generation accountability report that we've had since around 2014-15. We have been referring recently to this as the legacy report. And if you recall using this particular reporting feature on EdSite, it could get somewhat frustrating because you're taking a single year look at every indicator and flipping back and forth, or maybe downloading the Excel and using the Excel so it's a little more nimble. These reports are available at the state, school, and district level, obviously. And you can see I highlighted indicator 6 in the big table and just kind of popped it out at the bottom so it was a little more visible. So for each of the indicators, all on one table, you're seeing what the school earned. This is, in this case, this is the state value, what the target was, the maximum points available for that indicator, the points that were earned, and the percentage of points earned. And we have this for every indicator. So in this case, this is indicator 6, post-secondary readiness. Remember this naming? I said I was going to point out when we have inconsistencies. Notice that in the legacy table, we're still using that old name where we talk about percent passing exams. We had to update indicator 6, the naming of it, because it's not just about exams anymore. Now we're looking at success in dual credit courses. So again, you'll see some of those naming conventions changing slowly. It's not until you really start digging at every single report and everything on EdSite until you realize, oh my gosh, this terminology is everywhere. So it takes a while to clean that up, but we're working on it. So this is the legacy report. Moving on to something that's a little newer. Again, same data, but in this case, it's a dashboard. And this was released in the fall when we released the 21-22 data. It provides you a lot more flexibility in what you want to display for groups of indicators. So notice on this dashboard, you can look at indicator 5 and 6 together, because I said they were connected indicators. Indicator 5 being more of an access measure, percentage of kids taking certain types of courses. And in this particular dashboard, you can click on the taking courses blue rectangle near the top of the report. If you click on that, suddenly the blue line will disappear and you'll have just the orange line. And that orange line is our indicator 6. Notice for 21-22, I'm looking at the state value. Again, 43.5% of 11th and 12th graders meeting that expectation for indicator 6. This report allows you to look at selected districts, selected schools, selected years. It's pretty flexible. Another place where we see indicator 6 values is on in the Connecticut report cards. There is a performance section of the Connecticut report cards that you'll see demonstrating post-secondary readiness. See here again, we're sort of starting to update the language with the most recent release. This happens to be the state level report, but in a district or school level report, you'll also see the state for comparisons if you're looking at a district report. And if you're looking at a school report, you'll see the state and the district for comparison purposes. And now getting to the post-secondary readiness report. This also was released around the same time that we did the dashboard, so along with the 21-22 accountability release. What's nice about this is it allows for a deeper analysis of the various components of Indicator 6. You know, as Danielle was saying, Indicator 6 is built on a lot of different pieces of information. SAT, AP, IB, ACT, now we have dual credit. This report allows you to break indicator 6 down. And it also is nice because you can go further and disaggregate by subgroup, which we really aren't able to do in any of the prior reports that I had displayed for you on the previous slides. Now, I want to do a really quick live walkthrough of the post-secondary readiness report, so just bear with me for a second. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Najee, I can see your face. If you give me a thumbs up, you're seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. This is on EdSite. Notice along the top, there are different filters. For organization type, for instance, these are not mutually exclusive categories. So you can see public districts and schools, that's what I most often use, but I may have a reason to take a look at alliance districts. Actually, I mean, alliance districts are part of public districts and schools. So you can see how these categories overlap, but you might have a reason to want to see results for indicator 6 for a particular type of organization. This will allow you to do that. You can go back multiple school years, but remember, if you're looking at the dual credit component of indicator 6, you're not going to have data for the past years. You're only going to see that for 21-22. The prior years, you're only going to see those test-based benchmark values. Here for select a measure, this is where you can start breaking down indicator 6 by exam or by dual credit. And then finally, that disaggregation tool over here, being able to look at various subgroups and how they're performing on this indicator, and the components of the indicator are very important, especially if you've been in any of our discussions around expanding access to dual credit courses. If you're at a high school, you are thinking about ways that you can use grant funds that were announced on May 1st to expand options for students, and using the data included in this report as part of the application process. So let's take a look at, let's see here. I am going to go ahead and say state level. Again, there's that 43.5% value that I had displayed on previous slides. That's the 21-22 statewide number. But if I want to see, well, what about dual credit? What does that look like? And notice the language here is still dual enrollment, but we're working on some updates. So now I can see, while I had over 40% of students, 40% of 11th and 12th graders meeting the indicator 6 benchmark, now when I look at just dual credit, that number really goes down quite a bit to 22.3%. And then if I want to take a look at maybe just students with disability, or students with high needs, you can see it goes even lower to 12.8%. And that's one of the talking points that we've been really trying to drive home in this whole dual credit expansion effort, is seeing how we can open up more avenues for all of our students. So I'm going to go back to the all students group for a second. I just want to show you a couple more features. I'm going to get rid of state level here so that I have all districts displayed. and I want to go ahead and look at any benchmark. Notice that it's going to sort in descending order based on the indicator 6 value, and you can sort high to low just by clicking on the column header, which I think is a really nice feature. If you take a look at the district chart, it's going to give you a visual of how districts are doing on indicator 6. I can get a school level table, just like my district level table, and a school level chart. And then finally, the all measures allows me to look at, here we have state level at the top. There's that 43.5% that we keep seeing. So that's the indicator 6 value overall. But then as I scroll across the screen, let's see, I maybe have this a little too big, but as I scroll across the screen, you can see those various components of indicator 6 broken down. And then finally, probably if I were doing some sort of analysis, I would want to export this to Excel. So it's just easier to work with. I can make other kinds of visuals. So lots of options in this report. Ajit, is there anything you wanted to add about the report itself? No?
No, I think just to mention that this is how we put out a press release. Governor and the commissioner, when they created announced the dual credit expansion initiative, we had a couple of charts in there that showed different student groups and how they performed on the different components of indicator 6. So what percentage of students did met benchmark through each of these different pathways. It's basically, that data is basically coming from this report. One thing I would say, if you go back to if you go to the school table, for example, I think one thing you could show is, if you want to know who are the IB schools, if you will, you can actually select that measure and select IB, International Baccalaureate, and then you'll see who are some of the schools who are doing IB in the state. So it's kind of, the percentage is small overall, but notice that for certain schools, it's a big part of their portfolio. So I think that's kind of the reason for having this indicator in the very first place, is that there are many different ways in which our students can demonstrate their readiness for life after high school. We started with exams, but now we're really gone beyond exams with dual credit. And it's, again, academic pathways, it could be career-oriented pathways. So this indicator really tries to recognize that and reward the work that's happening in our schools, and that is going to expand even more, which we're absolutely thrilled about. So this is the report that we'll be using, particularly the one when you disaggregate by dual credit, to actually see sort of the reward of our efforts to expand dual credit. This is what we'll be using and looking at to see who are some of these schools that are growing their dual credit program, and how can we continue to support, and who is not there, and who we need to support more. So thank you, Renee.
Okay, I am going to go back to the slideshow for a second.
And again, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, or you can raise the virtual hand. And I think we're coming close to the end of our presentation, so please don't hesitate to ask us questions.
So a few resources that I wanted to point out. I'm always mentioning the Using Accountability Results to Guide Improvement. We update it annually. So this is an ever-changing document. If you use it, you'll notice at the front, I usually have an update table of all the changes for this go-around. So I use it all of the time. We wanted to highlight our Dual Credit Opportunities website, which is a new website that will be evolving over time, but right now it's a place to get more information about our institutions of higher ed who are looking to partner with school districts who want to go for the grant. The dual credit file specifications for IHEs, Danielle had mentioned it. Obviously your districts aren't using these file specs, but I think it can be helpful to know what information it is that we're getting from our partners and those are the data that we're using for indicator 6, which is publicly reported, and people are certainly asking you questions about that. So it will eventually be posted on the Dual Credit Opportunities website. Right now it is posted and you can access it through these slides, but you're not going to visually see it on the Dual Credit site yet. We're working on giving it an appropriate home. And then the last two, not indicators, but links are for the recordings for behind the numbers session 1 and behind the numbers session 2. If you didn't get a chance to catch those and you think you might be interested in learning more, definitely visit the recordings. I think we've gotten some pretty good feedback. We've talked about how these 3 sessions were for the 22-23 school year. And if you have ideas about potential sessions for next year, then maybe we can internally plan to continue this moving forward and giving you the information that you need to hopefully make your lives easier when the public and your staff are asking you questions and wanting answers about all of the different reports that come out of the performance office. And then finally, our contact information. So I guess we need to take a look for more questions. Raise your hand if you want to ask them orally.
I see a couple of questions coming in the chat. Jen was asking, like, is there an EdSite Secure report that shows me student level? And I responded in the chat, but I'll just give voice to it here too, to say that particularly with dual credit, we are in conversations with our IHE partners because we will want to make that information available to you, because the information we have from the IHEs is at a course level. So we know which course in which college the student actually took, because that's where the grade is, at that course level. And so we want to make sure we clear all of that with our IHE partners and also with the test vendors, just to make sure that they're okay with that too. Just one little tip, when you see in the early indication tool, for example, that tool, and Danielle, you might have to fact check me on this one. I believe that report, when you go for 11th and 12th graders, you will see their SAT score in that report. And I could tell you, I have looked personally where a student who may not invest energies into the Connecticut SAT school day and may not do well on EIT has a much higher score on the SAT. That's because we've actually picked up that higher score. So you could kind of get a sense of this, but we don't actually break down the indicator 6 by the detail you're asking. It is something that's on our plan. And then when is the stat calculated? It's the dual credit really was a big shift for us last year. We have found our way around it, but as you can tell how many colleges there are, we are getting that many files essentially from all these colleges. And we tightened up the specifications this year. So our hope is that when we get their data by early to mid-August, that it's clean. And because this all feeds off a June PSIS, like that has to be finalized, which it isn't till mid to late August. So the indicator 6 calculations really don't, and a lot of the accountability calculations for several of these indicators don't begin in earnest until September, because that's when we can actually even begin the calculations. And then there's a whole ton of validation that needs to occur as well. So it's really September, October is when these calculations are done.
And I think if you have a chance to, or if you had a chance to attend the prior sessions, or if you take a peek at the recording, you'll see that some indicators you have a really early idea of how schools and districts will do when it's publicly reported. Indicator 6 is probably a little different. That's a longer path to public reporting than some of the others.
Other questions? Or comments or requests?
I guess I would suggest to people on the call, you know, you saw the evolution of the indicator 6 reporting, even the changing of indicator 6. And so much of that is based on feedback that we get from all of you. So I would encourage you to continue to provide us that feedback. We take all of that information in and we consider how we can make it happen. It doesn't always happen quickly, but we appreciate the input. And I think because of all of you, we make our reports better, we make the indicators more meaningful to school districts. So I would say keep up the input, keep it coming.
And apply for the dual credit grant, expansion grant. Work with your district to make that happen. All right, I think Danielle, any other points from you? Okay, Renee, anything else?
I'm
If
good.
not, we'll bring this session to a close. The recording will be posted online, and handouts for this session will be sent. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you next year behind the numbers.